Hi, I'm Wil Wheaton. I am the narrator of The Martian, which was written by this delightful gentleman, Andy Weir.
I'm Andy Weir, and I'm the writer of The Martian, which was narrated by this delightful gentleman, Wil Wheaton.
And we're here today to talk about the delightful narration of this delightful novel. I read The Martian very, very close to publication. I feel like I got it in the first 2 weeks of it being released.
Well, thanks.
I have a ton of friends who work at JPL.
Oh, yeah.
And as you can imagine, it just tore through JPL. So one of my buddies who worked there, I was like, you've got to read this book. And I feel like I read it in like 2.5 days.
Awesome.
Like I just couldn't put it down. I want to know how you built the narrative. Did you plot the whole thing, or did you discovery write it and then backfill in places where you needed to make the science work?
Well, mostly I tried to go forward. So I guess made it up as I went along is the truth.
So did you do that thing that we talk about writers doing where you're like, I'm going to keep putting my characters into terrible situations to see how they can surprise me to get out of it?
Somewhat, although really the whole book is just one long cascade failure.
Yes.
So it's like this went wrong. So the way he has to survive this opens himself up to this going wrong. So the way he has to deal with that and so that's kind of what I wanted. Each problem to, he comes up with a solution, but the solution kind of creates a new problem. Because you can use bad luck to get your characters into trouble like once or twice, but
Sure.
He can't just keep getting just unlucky. Everything has to flow from the previous problem.
I love the moments where Mark is convinced that he has solved a big problem, and then it turns out that he didn't.
Yeah, thanks. That's just kind of my own experience with the scientific progress. I used to work when I was very young, I used to work in research and development, just as sort of a lab monkey, just cleaning test tubes, that sort of thing. But it was always like, okay, we've got this figured out. No, we don't. Okay, now we're going to run this experiment. No, we can't. Okay, now finally everything's good, and the power goes out. And just there's always just one more thing. It's like it's like an episode of Columbo. That's just one more thing.
Yeah,
right.
There's
just always something wrong.
Were there moments where you were surprised by what the science said you could or couldn't do?
Yeah, absolutely. And in answer to that question, I kind of have to ask, depends on your definition of first draft.
Okay.
Because The Martian was originally a serial that I was releasing to my website.
Okay.
And I had a small group, about 3,000 people who were regular readers.
Yep.
This is all before anybody knew who I was and anything like that. Because of the other stuff that I posted to my site, web comics, short stories, other serials, it was very scientifically based. It was very, very much a science dork kind of content. And so, these people. And so
I do. They are
very
my
much,
people.
they are your people.
I am of them, and they are mine.
You are of the body.
Yes.
And so when I posted chapters online, they would immediately come after me with any scientific inaccuracies.
Yeah.
So I did a pretty good job on those, but any mistakes were caught immediately. So by the time it was actually a completed book, it was incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
Like there are a couple of scientific inaccuracies in the story. 2 of them, at least, are deliberate.
Okay.
Yeah. So the sandstorm at the beginning can't happen.
Really?
Really.
Explain how.
Well, because Mars's atmospheric pressure is less than 1% of Earth's.
Okay.
So Mars does get 150 kilometer an hour windstorms.
Yep.
But since the density of the air is so thin that it would feel like a 1 mile an hour breeze on you. It would have a difficult time knocking over a piece of paper, let alone a 27-ton spacecraft.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and most people didn't know that. And at the time I wrote it, I knew that it was, BS, but I'm like, nobody knows this. And then, when it came out...
It turns out 3,000 people know it?
Well, first off, 3,000 people knew it, but I'm like, I'm letting that go. It's a person versus nature story, and I wanted nature to get the first shot in. I had other ideas for how the failure could happen, like they're doing an engine test and something goes wrong, but I wanted nature to get the first punch in. Later on, after The Martian came out, everything was going awesome, and I, got VIP tours of NASA and stuff.
Yeah.
They told me that I learned that Mars has lightning. And I wish I'd known that, because then I could have had a lightning strike start everything.
As a writer, all the science of it is cool. The puzzle solving is cool. The adventure of it is cool. But the reason I fell in love with your book is that I fell in love with these characters. They feel like people I know.
Thanks.
They feel like people I have met and people I am friends with.
One of the highest pieces of praise I ever received was from a high-ranking NASA administrator, and he said like, when I was reading, when I read other space books, whatever, I don't care if they're realistic or not. I just like to read it. It's no big deal. But he said when he was reading The Martian, he got really, really stressed out because he's like, this could happen. This could happen. It just felt so real to him, and he's like feeling really bad for Teddy, the guy in charge of NASA. He's like, oh God, I would have this decision to make.
There was a day when we were recording the book, and it's a lot of NASA stuff. It's a lot of press conferences, and there's a lot of them, and the attitude from all of the people who are not Mark is so different from his. Like, he is the guy in the most peril, and he has the wryest sense of humor about it. And he is the guy who's like, well, I guess this is happening now. And I would spend an entire day just with him, and we'd get to the end of the page count for the day, and I'd go home and I'd feel great. At the end of this NASA day, I was exhausted because I had to keep bringing out the very real tension of these guys, especially the administrators and the higher ups, going like, it's like that moment in Apollo 13 where he's like, I've never lost a guy and I'm not losing a guy now.
NASA's never lost an astronaut in space, and we're not going to lose one now.
Yeah. When you were developing Mark as a character, how much did he kind of reveal himself to you, which can happen when we're writing, and how much of him did you sort of plan out in advance?
So I guess 100% and 0%.
Okay.
So basically, I had Mark's personality right from the first sentence because he's just me.
Oh,
I mean, it's
okay.
as simple as that.
Okay.
It's just my personality, except not quite. It's the idealized version of me.
Right.
It's all the aspects of myself that I like, and they're magnified.
Yeah.
And then all the things I don't like, my many neuroses and various problems and stuff like that. He doesn't have those problems.
Yeah.
Like, I have a really significant fear of flying.
Yeah.
Mark is not really afraid of that many
Not
things.
really.
Not really afraid of anything, really.
Yeah.
But he's wry, he's witty, he's smart. I have all those qualities at about 10% of what he has, and so that's basically it. And I think that for most writers, if you look at any book, the protagonist in that book is usually someone the writer wants to be or someone the writer wants to have sex with.
Right.
Basically, it's one of those two. For the
That
record,
makes
I want
sense.
to be Mark, but yeah, I mean that's pretty much how it goes.
Was he always going to be a botanist?
Originally, he was going to be. The mission was going to have a whole bunch of rovers involved. Like they figure, you've got humans on Mars doing their thing, but then also 24 rovers all being remote controlled by a single person at the hab. But I ended up changing over to him being a botanist because the growing potatoes to stay alive thing became such a central part of the story that I needed an explanation for why he does that so flawlessly.
I feel also like metaphorically and symbolically the fact that he studies the propagation of life. And he's in a place where the entire planet's trying to kill him all the time.
Yes, that was deep symbolism. That was definitely intentional on my part.
Yeah, excellent. That's some high quality pipe smoking,
There
sir.
we go. Yes, thank you. Any accusations of hidden meanings or depth or anything like that in the story are incorrect.
Is there a moment in The Martian where there's something that completely surprised you, where you were just like, oh, I guess I'm doing this now?
Yes, because when I was researching potatoes,
Yeah.
because this may surprise you, but as a science dork, space dork, physics dork, I actually don't know much about how to grow potatoes.
Okay.
So I ended up doing a lot of research online, figuring, okay, how do they grow potatoes? What do you need? What nutrients do they need? What, could you get away with this in a sandy kind of soil? And I learned all the information I needed, and among those tidbits of data was They say like the moisture content of the soil that the potatoes are going to be in has to be at least a certain amount. I don't remember. You've read it more recently than I have. I think it's like 40%. And then I was like, oh, whoops. Okay, that's actually going to take a lot of water. And I said, like, did all the math for, how many potato plants he was growing and all that. And I found out he'd need like hundreds and hundreds of liters of water. And there's just no plausible way that a Mars mission would send that much heavy ass water when they can just recycle it, And so I realized, I have a problem. I need to explain how Mark Watney gets all this water. So the entire subplot where he's reducing hydrazine, where he's getting the fuel, making the water, accidentally blows up the hab almost, and all that stuff like that, that all came out of just me being so far down the rabbit hole on potato farming that...
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And that's one of my favorite things about writing hard sci-fi is that, like, science, like, you don't have to come up with explanations for why your MacGuffin works this way or that way. Real science has real answers.
Yeah.
And you can just keep digging and digging and digging. And sometimes at the bottom of that rabbit hole is some awesome plot thing you never considered.
About 4 months ago, I get a call from my agent, and he says, Audible wants you to do The Martian. And I was like, really? Like, that's awesome. I'm so excited. Did you have anything to do with that?
I mean, only tangentially in that they said, hey, we were thinking about having Wil Wheaton do it. What do you think? I'm like, yes.
That's really cool.
I experienced Ready Player One as an audiobook.
Oh, cool.
Narrated by this gentleman here. And so I had actually, because I was on a long drive and stuff like that, so that is how I ended up reading Ready Player One, which is one of my favorite books ever.
It's one of mine too. I really like it.
And so I was like, hey, this is great. I mean, I know he's a fantastic audiobook narrator because he was the narrator of one of my favorite audio, so I had no reservations at all.
Let's talk a little bit about the new material that I got to read for this because I love that. So I knew the book. When I narrated it, it'll be the third time that I read it. I really felt like I knew it. I feel like I know these characters. I feel like I know the world. I'm very familiar with the story. I get to read these new pieces, tell the kids at home a little bit about what they can expect. I want to know what your creative process behind choosing those moments was.
Well, several of the things that you read were actually from a while ago, and they were part of a marketing campaign in the initial release. It's just they were never included in the book. But so I wrote them. All of the extras are things I wrote after the book was complete.
Okay.
None of them are deleted scenes or anything like that. But the other one that you're talking about, that one I wrote specifically for the Audible edition because we want to encourage, we want to give you a little, some encouragement to come on board and buy this. You may have already read the book. You may have even already heard the audiobook, but you haven't heard this.
And I don't want to give it away because it's a really beautiful scene.
Oh, thanks.
Are you in one of the output phases of being a writer? So I'm in an input phase right now.
Oh, okay.
So I'm reading a lot and listening a lot.
I'm cranking away on my, I'm almost done with the first draft of my next book.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's terrific.
Thanks. And then I'm going to do a heavy editing pass, send it off to my editor, and then...
Yeah, for people who are not writers, it sounds like Andy's really close to being done, and he's not.
Not.
It's like you've almost made it to the starting line.
Yeah, basically.
And you got to do all that work to get to the finish line.
The analogy I like to use is say, imagine if you're a sculptor and you're driving along one day and you see a big block of marble on the side of the road. You're like, I could make something beautiful out of that.
Yeah.
And so you go, you get your truck, you hoist
Quarry
it into
the marble
truck,
out.
you bring it into your workshop, set it down. Whew, that's the equivalent of the first draft.
Yeah,
I mean, just that work right there.
I would strongly agree with that.
Yeah. Knowing that the fans are waiting for it is horribly stressful. Following up The Martian with Artemis, that was rough. I challenge you, I have a challenge for you or anybody watching this. Go online, find a review of Artemis that does not mention The Martian. Right. And so, but now this is my
saying. There's that great saying. you have your entire life to write your first album and 6 months to write your second album.
Yes, that is definitely true.
And of course, when you made something rad, people are gonna want to talk about it.
It's a good problem to have. I mean, this is definitely a first world problem here.
Yeah.
And so I'm not whining too much, but it is stressful.
Will you talk at all about the third book? Will you tell us anything about it? Do
not
you want to
just
tease
yet.
anything about it?
No, not just yet.
Okay,
No,
all right, that's
no,
fair.
No,
That's
no
fair.
spoilers on that one just now.
That's fair.
It's another, realistic science fiction
Yeah.
story. It is not a sequel to either of the others.
Okay.
But yeah, so the fandom is there, and I really want to do right by them.
Sure.
That's my main goal. I
Yeah.
mean, people think that and I'm sure a lot of writers do sell out or whatever. People think that after a while you don't care, but I do care. I've got lots of money. I'm not doing it for the money now. I want to make the fans happy.
Yeah. This is the second time I have gotten to be in the creative process for a thing that I'm already a fan of. The first time was Star Trek. So I was already a fan of The Martian. That I got to bring it to life in this way was a tremendous honor. And I sincerely hope that the fans of my work and the fans of your work are gonna like it as much as I loved being part of it.
Well, thanks. I hope so too.
It was a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Andy,
I am very excited for your next book to come out. And if you're looking for a narrator, I know a guy.
Okay. Well, give me his number or something.
Okay.
I'm looking to change, so. No, cut that. Don't cut that.